So, steelhead season's here, and I've been tying a lot of these double hooked articulate body flies. They work really good for steelhead, so I figured I'd do a video. Tie down your flash to make the tail, a couple wraps, fold it over. Oop. Make sure it's secure. Much better. So that's the flash. Now I take a couple small little pieces of this bunny strips, and you want to make sure they're both about the same length. They're going to mirror each other, one on each side. Take a little bit of that fuzz off just to get rid of some of the bulk. Set it up. A couple secure wraps on one side. Again, remove all those fuzzies. Same on the other side, a few secure wraps. And crank it down. So that's the tail. Body of the rear fly. Strip of rabbit fur with a little bit of the fuzz torn off so it's not so bulky. Secure that in, wrap it down. Move your thread up to the front of the hook by the eye. You start to wrap this. You don't want to overlap too much, or otherwise it gets too bulky, but just keep that fur pointing backwards as you wrap forwards. So if you see I'm going like this, that pulls it back, I wrap. Same. Now the head of this fly, which is the back hook, does not have to be perfectly beautiful. You just want it nice and tight because this is all going to be covered up by by the front fly. Just make sure it's tied down. Snip that off. And again, doesn't have to look great, but it does have to be secure. I like to put a little more flash there. So how I like that is I take about twice of the length that I really need. Put it on one side. A couple secure wraps. And then fold that over to the other side. A couple secure wraps. Then smooth it back and really crank it. And again, this is all going to be hidden, so it doesn't have to look that great. Whip finish. And that's the back half of the fly. To use a little UV head cement that I got from Trout Legend. Dude, I must be running low. It's getting towards the bottom. So put a drop on there. The nice thing about this stuff is it does not set up until you hit it with the UV light. So you can make it kind of do what you want to do without worrying about getting your fingers stuck together. I like to take a little stick, which this is just a straightened out paper clip, put it in there to make sure that the eye of the hook stays clear. Hit it with the light, and that's all going to set up and harden. Pull your spacer out there. It's the back. What I like to do when I take this out of the vise, this is important, find the hook, take a little piece of cork and put it over the point, because when you tie this thing back in, this is going to be your tailing fly. And I can tell you from experience, you will stab yourself and bleed. So There you go. Now the front fly, bead head. These bead heads match the material. They're from Orvis. I don't know if you can see that, but I'll show you when we're all done. Put it in there. Go ahead and wrap your thread. Similar to the back fly, with one important difference. So monofilament doesn't have to be a super long strip, maybe 4 inches. Secure that down. Now what this is going to do, it's going to form a loop at the end of this first hook, and that's where your back fly that we just tied gets integrated in. I like to put another bead head in this piece of mono in between the 2 hooks. A little extra weight, plus it lets it move a little more natural. Now here's your fly that we just tied. Of course, the cork is on there. Jeez. There we go. Let's make a little loop at the end. You're going to be able to adjust it. So put a couple securing wraps, not too tight because you're going to move this around. So how's that look? Looks good. It's got the freedom to move. Yeah. So then you can start to crank it a little bit more. Double check. How's it look? Still good. You can snip this off. And really crank it down. Don't go too far down the bend of the hook. You want it to be natural. Crank that in. Now, this next part is just a bit of insurance. I like to put a drip of head cement, head cement on here just to get it a little more in place. You know, steelhead are big fish. You just never know if that's going to hold. So I like to give it a little more cement and then integrate that thread back into the cement. Hit it with the light. Little flash to start to fill that gap between front back fly. Tie it in, fold it back, crank it down. Alright. Take your strip of rabbit fur, take a little bit of that, strip a little bit of the fur off. It's on a little bit of an angle here. Crank it down. Good wrap. Make sure that fur is going back, just like the first fly that we did. Keep working it back as you go. Pulling that hair. Really short here. Normally it would be a longer strip, but I have been tying quite a few of these. I'm right down to the end. So let's just crank that to hold it in place. And you want to snip it off pretty close to the bead. And then you can catch that. Anything that doesn't look great, you can cover up with thread. I like to use red. For some reason, a red head, it's a fish attractant. So there it is. You can put another little bit of flash in here if you like. I usually don't. There's quite a bit of flash on there to begin with. A couple whip finishes. Flies this size, I usually just do it by hand. I don't use the tool. Cinch it. Snip it. Whatever else I just snipped. You can wet that to move it back. I think you're supposed to use it, like dip your fingers in water, but you know. So same process. Take your applicator, whatever you use. A little stuff on there. And I like to paint this on at this point. I don't want to put a big drip on there. Probably doesn't really matter, but it looks ugly. So. And once it's coated, you don't really need to protect that eye. So you hit it with the light. And it's done. So this is how this will swim. You can see it really has the freedom to move. So as it goes through the water, it's lifelike. It's a pretty easy tie. I mean, it's basically like tying two flies and then connecting them. So it takes a little time, but man, they really work well. Yeah, I hope that helps.